It's not too early to make reading plans, is it? Hello everyone and welcome to my TBR 2023. Yes, I'm already looking ahead. I know we still have about 5 weeks left in this year, but I'm looking ahead to the things that I want to read most, the priorities that I have in my reading year for 2023. Now, last year I made a video of the top 10 book series that I wanted to read in 2022, and I was successful in reading all of those. It was kind of the year of the series. But this year, one of the book series that I'm going to read is going to take an inordinate amount of time to read, so because of that, I have some different focus in mind for next year. So I've targeted some book series, some individual books, and some new-to-me authors that I'm looking to read next year. Any of these that you've read, I'd love for you to drop me a comment below and let me know about them. Especially the authors, because I don't know how much of each author I may read. I have an idea, but any insights that you can give me would be helpful as I explore these new authors. But let's go ahead and jump in and talk about the 4 book series that I'm going to look forward to reading most in 2023, starting with the Big Daddy, and that is the Malazan Book of the Fallen by Steven Erikson. 10 pretty chunky books. Of course, I'm doing a read-along with Alex and Jordan and Ian. I've linked their channels below because each time we read one of these books, we'll have a different discussion with a Malazan veteran on one of our channels. And I hope that you'll follow those discussions because I'm sure that all of those discussions will start spoiler-free and then move into spoiler talk. I'm really excited to embark upon this journey. Malazan is one of those very big book series that I haven't experienced yet, and I'm looking forward to this journey with some other great people that are going to read these together. So that is number 1 on the list. So my second book series that is kind of a reaction, to be honest, to reading Malazan. My second big book series is not a really big one, but that is The Chronicles of Narnia by C.S. Lewis. The 7 books of the Chronicles of Narnia probably don't even total one of these Malazan books. So it's going to be a great change of pace. Whereas Malazan is dense, Narnia is pretty thin, whereas Malazan is notoriously a challenging read, Narnia is an easy read. So I'm looking forward to the contrast. In fact, I plan on reading both of these series back to back. So, for instance, in January, the first book I plan on reading in January is Gardens of the Moon. Book 1 of Malazan, I will immediately after that read The Lion and the Witch and the Wardrobe. So I'm looking forward to that second book series as to provide a great contrast to Malazan. I have read The Chronicles of Narnia before, but it was in 6th grade. And I don't really remember a whole lot about it, although I was not high upon it at that age. We'll see what the adult reader in me sees with Narnia, whether it's something I enjoy or if maybe my 12-year-old self was right. So I'm looking forward to that as my second book series. My third book series is not a traditional book series, but is The History of Middle-earth by J.R.R. Tolkien and Christopher Tolkien. I have the 3-volume omnibus of these 12 books. It is a 12-volume history of Middle-earth. And I think it is kind of historical text. I don't know if there's a lot of storytelling in here, so this is very untraditional type of book series. But I have been enjoying the backside of Tolkien's Legendarium, especially a couple of the great tales I loved were Beren and Luthien and the Children of Hurin, and I adore the Unfinished Tales, so I'm very much looking forward to reading more of this back catalog. This will kind of close my journey of all of the works of Tolkien, at least the ones that Christopher Tolkien helped put out after his father's death. And the 4th book series that is a top priority for me is my top priority in the science fiction genre next year, and that is Hyperion Cantos by Dan Simmons. A lot of times, someone explains a book, and you as a reader think, oh, that's for me. That's how I feel when people talk about Hyperion. It is a science fiction tale that is told in the manner of the Canterbury Tales, in that all of these travelers that are making this pilgrimage to this mysterious figure called the Shrike are telling their different stories. And in many ways, apparently, it's a lot of different genres within this overarching science fiction tale. It sounds like something that I will just absolutely love. And the 4 books of the Hyperion Cantos, I hear some people say they like different books more than the others. I hear Hyperion itself is the one that gets the most praise, but I have heard enough people that I trust their opinions that say the rest of the series is just as good, and they may even prefer different books in the series a little bit more. So that is a top priority for me next year, the 4 books of the Hyperion Cantos by Dan Simmons. Okay, on to the individual books that are priority for me next year. The first is Lonesome Dove by Larry McMurtry. This is on the calendar for January. I'm really looking forward to reading this. Pulitzer Prize winning novel, considered one of the best, if not the best, Western tales ever written. It's a book that has great influence, and 2 authors that I absolutely love, Joe Abercrombie and Stephen King, both call this their favorite novel or one of their favorite novels. I've heard just such universal praise for this one as well. I'm so excited to read Lonesome Dove in January. The second individual book, standalone as it were, that I'm looking forward to reading next year is Taipan by James Clavell. This January I read James Clavell's Shogun and loved it, and frankly didn't shut up about it all year. I've been talking about it ever since. It is one of my best books of the year, if not my best book that I've read in 2022. So Clavell wrote 6 books that became known as the Asian Saga. And I think all that they really have in common, because they are standalone novels, what they have in common is just that they are set in Asia and thematically talk about East versus West and those differences, and talk about the cross-cultural clashes and the cross-cultural learning and things like that I loved so much about Shogun. The setting is a bit different in Taipan. Shogun was set in Japan in the 1600s, and Taipan is set in Hong Kong in the 1840s. But I'm very much looking forward to reading it, as well as all of the ones in the Asian Saga. They are beefy books, but I love epic-length historical fiction like Shogun. I know on the Grimoire Discord they're doing a read-along of Shogun in January, so I'm hoping that after that I can convince some of the people that are doing that read-along to join me to read Taipan. I know Alan at the Library of Alexandria just loves this book, and maybe I'll convince him to read it as well, but hopefully this is a book that I get to early in 2023, because I do want to read more James Clavell because I love Shogun so much. The third standalone that I have on the calendar next year is a book that's going to be released in May, and that is The Ferryman by Justin Cronin. So as soon as I saw that Cronin had a new book coming out, I immediately went to Amazon, pre-ordered, before I even read the synopsis, because Cronin is truly an auto-buy author for me. He's only written 5 books, but I pretty much loved 4 of the 5, and I'm just a big fan of this author. He writes in different genres. His most famous works are the trilogy that began with The Passage, which is a fine trilogy of speculative fiction. The beginning of that first book will punch you in the gut like no other book will ever give you. But he also wrote a book called Marion O'Neill, which is interconnected short stories that won the Hemingway Award. And then perhaps his best book is called The Summer Guest, which I consider one of the finest in a genre that I just call the great American novel. And Cronin is a writer of a lot of talents, and for me it's most visceral talents. He makes you cry, he makes you feel things. I mentioned the gut punch at the end of The Passage. So it didn't even matter to me, whatever The Ferryman was about, I was going to order it. So it's coming out in May. It looks like it's kind of a fantasy tale, so I'm doubly excited, but Justin Cronin writes a book, I order it, I read it, and I probably love it. So I'm definitely looking forward to that release in May. So my final standalone on this TBR 2023 is Magician by Raymond E. Feist. Now this is a reread of sorts. So I have read Magician in the form of the 2 paperbacks, Magician Apprentice and Magician Master. I read the Rift Saga in high school, and I read it once as an adult. So I'm going to read it a third time for a couple reasons. One is I was just shopping on Abe Books and I saw this volume of Magician. Now, I've seen single volumes of this book. That's not the publication that I read, the 2 separate paperbacks. So I knew it existed, but what I did not know is this anniversary edition that has restored about 50 or 60 pages from Feist's original text. And doing just a little bit of research, it seems that he cut out a couple scenes that had to do with character development. So of course I want to read those. I also want to experience this volume as a single volume, just to see if it hits a little different than reading it separately as Magician Apprentice and Magician Master. This will, of course, lead me to a reread of the Rift War saga, but this also ties into my first author that is a big priority for me next year, and that's Janny Wirtz. Because the first thing I'm going to read from Janny Wirtz is the Empire trilogy that she co-wrote with Raymond E. Feist, which takes place in the Rift War world. So that's the first thing I'm going to read with Janny. Janny is very prolific. I think she has about 20 books out there. I plan on reading a good amount of them next year. I just have this suspicion that she's an author that I'm going to click with. I don't know why that I have that suspicion. Maybe because some of the people I trust talk so reverently about her writing, and I've just seen enough of her that I have a feeling that I'm going to connect with her as a reader. So I know she has a bunch of standalones. She has this trilogy. She has another trilogy. I won't go into the War of Light and Shadow, which is her big 11-book series. I think reading Malazan is going to be enough of a big series for me next year, but I'm going to read a lot of these other ones by Janny Wirtz. So if you've read any other works by Janny Wirtz, please let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear your thoughts on which ones I should explore. I'm probably going to just kind of go chronologically and explore her early works leading up to the War of Light and Shadow. So my second author priority next year is Mark Lawrence. As many of you may know, if you've followed the channel for a while, I took a big break from reading the fantasy genre of about 15, almost 20 years. And there's some great voices that appeared in that gap of time when I wasn't reading fantasy, and Mark Lawrence is one of those voices. I know I'm seeing right now Philip Chase is reading his Book of the Ancestor, which sounds fascinating. That sounds like a great trilogy. But I'm going to start at the beginning. I only have one of his books, physical copy so far, and that is Prince of Thorns. I picked up this beautiful signed and numbered edition from the Broken Binding, and I'm looking forward to reading this first trilogy, The Broken Empire. If I enjoy that, I'll probably go straight into Red Queen's War, which I think is set in the same universe as The Broken Empire. But beyond that, it's hard to say. I don't know if he's an author that I'll just devour a lot of things this year, or maybe read one or two trilogies and then pick him up in a year or two and read the rest. But Mark Lawrence is an author that's a top priority for me in 2023. The next author that is a top priority for me is Guy Gavriel Kay. Now, Guy Gavriel Kay doesn't seem to get the love of a lot of the fantasy community. I think one of the big reasons is he doesn't have a big series. He doesn't have that 15-book series or that bunch of trilogies that connect together or anything like that, because he wrote a lot of standalones. But I have a suspicion that GGK is going to be an author that I really enjoy, because it seems like his style of fantasy is something I would enjoy because it's rooted in historical fiction. Although it is not fantasy on our world in different eras, it's influenced by different eras of our world. And I think that just sounds really interesting to me. There are a couple videos that really made me interested in Guy Gavriel Kay, and they were on Bridger's channel, which is a library ladder. I'll link his channel below. He has two really great videos about Guy Gavriel Kay. One about how he is his favorite fantasy author, and the other one is a tier list, talks about all of his different works. And that's the one that gave me the idea of where to start. So I plan on reading at least two works of Guy Gavriel Kay in 2023. The two that I'm going to start with is A Song for Arbonne and The Lions of Al Rassan. Those are the two that I'll start with. If you've read GGK, I'd love to hear your thoughts about that author in the comments below. I'm really excited to go into his works. I just have a feeling that he's going to be an author that I really enjoy. And the final author on this list, last but certainly not least, is David Gemmell. Now, Gemmell has been around for a while. I know that I'm pretty sure he passed away a few years ago, but he wrote a lot of fantasy when I was reading fantasy in the 80s, but I just never discovered this author. And he wrote a lot since. He's also written a lot of historical fiction as well, and I've heard a lot of people talk about David Gemmell. I know Andrew at Andrew's Wizardly Reads raves about Gemmell, and he's one of the reasons that I wanted to pick up Gemmell this year. I've heard a lot of people talk about him, and I figured the best place to start is to pick up his first book, Legend, which is a fantasy tale. I've heard that it can read as a standalone, although it does kick off a larger series. I really don't know much about Gemmell, but I just know enough that I'm intrigued. I know he's written some historical fiction, some fantasy, and he's just an author that I've made a top priority for 2023. So as with GGK, if you've read Gemmell, please let me know in the comments below your recommendations, the things that you've liked from that author. Okay, so I went through kind of quick, but those are the 4 series, the 4 authors, and the 4 standalone books that are top priorities for me in 2023. What are your top priorities in 2023? Have you started making a list? Do you have a list like this? You're ready to go, so excited to embark upon a journey with some new authors, some new books, some new book series? I'd love to talk with you about it in the comments section. If you like this video, please like and subscribe. As always, find me on Twitter and Goodreads. I'd love to interact with you there. As always, thank you for watching. Until next time, goodbye.